Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jean Boda. I'm the Executive Director with the Alberta Community Crime Prevention Association, commonly known as ACPA. In May of this year, we will be hosting our annual Crime Prevention Conference in Edmonton. Our dates, May 5th through the 7th. In anticipation of this exciting event, we are hosting a series of interviews with our conference presenters. Today, I'm excited to be interviewing Michael Adjoran. On May the 6th, Michael will be presenting a presentation entitled The Prospects and Challenges of Restorative Practices to Foster Community Support for Online Conflict and Harm. We're delighted you can join us today, Michael. And if you could just share a little bit about yourself, please.
Absolutely, Jean. Thanks for having me, and I very much look forward to the conference. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Sociology, University of Calgary. I've been here about a decade now. I've been doing research on youth and online conflict and harm. I use those terms very specifically, rather than cyberbullying or other, specific forms of harm, because my research does explore with interviews. I've done focus groups and interviews with Canadian teens about their experiences with technology, everything from what's positive about the technology to what is also harmful about it as well. My wider research looks at societal responses to youth crime. I've done some research in Hong Kong as well about responses to youth crime in the colonial period of Hong Kong. And more recently, I've shifted to some research with a colleague, Professor Rosemary Ricciardelli at Memorial University in Newfoundland, looking at correctional officers in Canada as well. But I'm happy to talk to you more about my research, Jean.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much, Michael. Appreciate that. When we speak about things like cyberbullying, would you say its tentacles reach deep into life?
Definitely, definitely. There was a time when, in the early period of the internet, a lot of scholarship would examine what was different online. And there was a little bit of a romanticized, I would say almost a honeymoon period, if you like, right, of research where what's going on in cyberspace and what was going on online was somehow seen as having all this potential to be something completely different from what we see in terms of the inequalities we face in society, the racism, sexism, other forms of harm, and be this sort of leveling of the playing field online. And what we find in terms of including things like cyberbullying is that it's very much interconnected in terms of its impact. How we use social media, how we engage with each other online has infinite connections with offline spaces, which then themselves feed back to online dynamics as well. So it very much is inextricable.
Excellent, excellent. When it comes to young people, do you think parents and schools have run into difficulties addressing some of this?
Yes, specifically with cyberbullying, and I'm also looking at among young people experiences of non-consensual sexting. In sociology, there's the term image-based sexual harassment, image-based sexual abuse, and that really focuses on the non-consensual dynamics. Like you might have heard of the term revenge porn and these things. Cyberbullying itself is a challenge. I think one of the challenges in the schools and for parents alike is detecting it. It often goes under the radar, as some researchers have put it, sometimes it could be going on within the schools during school hours as youth are engaging on their phones. And of course, a lot of things happen outside school hours, and that's part of the challenge as well, is how do schools respond to these things that are clearly affecting the students in the classroom that occur outside of the time period of school and the physical walls of the school. That's a major challenge for sure.
So being an expert on this issue, could you share two things that might be hindering their efforts in how they deal with it, both parents and schools?
I do think that sometimes the messages are very much focused on a particular thing that can be expanded upon. So, for example, cyberbullying, one of the challenges when you're looking at cyberbullying, questions of has it increased over time and these sort of things is how it's being defined. And sometimes that changes. And often I found something ironic in my research, Gene, is that I'm talking with teens about cyberbullying responses in schools, and they would tell me, the messages sometimes they're not as well received as students get older. There's challenges there with the eye rolls about, just block people and stay safe and stuff. But for the most part, they agree cyberbullying is bad. It's harmful. They're on board with that. But sometimes what behaviors that are harmful are experienced that are simply not discussed as cyberbullying or not considered as cyberbullying. And that's part of the challenge is something can be dismissed as, oh, I was just trolling. I was just joking. I was pranking or punking or, some things are more subtle also, like being untagged in a group photo among your close peers. That may make young people feel excluded and stigmatized in the classroom. So there's challenges about how these things are understood when we say what do we mean when we say cyberbullying exactly? What does that mean? I think that those things are particularly challenging.
Do you think also sometimes parents and school officials feel uncomfortable with talking about it? First of all, just because they don't feel they know it enough to address it?
Well, it's funny that with that question, Gene, I'm actually just working with a data set that with my colleagues on educators, and we interviewed teachers in Alberta. We interviewed teachers in rural Atlantic Canada as
Yeah.
well. And one of the things that comes up in response to non-consensual sexting is a level of discomfort among educators, not feeling that they have the right training.
Right.
Certainly challenges with the curriculum, which at least some educators we spoke to expressed as being highly out of date in terms of often boys get a certain talk and girls get a certain talk in sexual health education, and there's not a sense of dialogue about it. And I think teachers need proper supports from
Yeah.
their administrators, from at the provincial level, even in terms of being able to approach these topics and the resources. I'll talk about this more at the conference, but one of the values of the restorative approaches is that it tries to have folks sit down in a context of mediation, where
Right.
if cyberbullying happened online or some sort of conflict happened online, we can talk about that and contextualize what happened in terms of a young person's experiences that can be mediated in the classroom that teachers might feel more support for doing if it's a consistent
Yeah.
practice in the schools.
Yeah. That's right. Exactly. I agree. Do you think cyberbullying is on the rise?
That's a great question. Yes, it's. I'm not saying yes that it's on the rise. I think yes,
No.
it's a great question.
Yeah.
It's interesting, some of the more recent surveys that have been conducted. I've pulled up a couple of the stats on this. I can read very briefly, but some of it comes from our general social survey in Canada. Some of the statistics Canada reports on this indicate. So, for example, looking at cyberbullying and cyber stalking. In 2014, about 17% of the population age 15 to 29, about 1.1 million people that accessed the internet at some point between 2009 and 2014 reported being cyberbullied or cyberstalked. A slightly later report but one that combined different surveys, so not just the GSS, but a couple of other ones, in looking at the question of cyberbullying specifically, found 1 in 4 teens, or 25%, aged
Yeah.
12 to 17, being reported. And among the findings, being threatened or insulted online by text messages was the most common, 16%.
Right.
This was followed by being excluded from an online community at 13%. But I also think a really great source of this, Gene, is Media Smarts. It's an organization that's a community-facing organization that has a great website and resources, not only for teens, but parents as well.
Yeah.
And they often focus on things like critical media literacy skills,
Mhm.
recognition of misinformation, disinformation. And Media Smarts has consistently conducted these large-scale surveys with young people in Canada about cyberbullying, sexting, and so forth. And one of their more recent surveys, this was collected around the period after the onset of the pandemic. Slightly over 1,000 students from grades 4 to 11 conducted September to December 2021 found 32% of youth have experienced meanness and cruelty online.
Mm.
A large number of those, 41%, experienced those from online gaming, 37% from private messages or text. So I think with those numbers, you can see there is anecdotal evidence for a rise in cyberbullying, and around the world, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, we did see spikes in online meanness and cruelty online, in particular social media platforms. That being said, it depends on what exactly you're asking, right? Online meanness and cruelty kind of expands the scope of experiences of harm. So you're going to get a higher percentage there as well.
Exactly, exactly. And when you're talking about reporting, a lot of people are ashamed of,
Mhm.
right? They feel ashamed that they got duped or whatever is going on. Yeah, it's very, very interesting. Michael,
Yeah.
is there a particular age where it's more prevalent?
There are some studies that indicate that there is a bit of an aging out dynamic. I do believe that I have a figure here about that. Yeah, some of the surveys that I just quoted indicates that um, among those aged 12 to 17, rates of cyberbullying increased with age, rising from 20% at age 12 to 27% by age 17. So that's an interesting dynamic where partly it's based on access to phones, access to social media platforms. There tends to be a bit of I would say, bottleneck of conflict and harm in junior high, around grades 7 and 8 and 9, that sometimes teachers are increasingly identifying. It's coming, with early access and some of the first uses of social media platforms that sometimes young people, you don't consider the implications for how to use these things effectively at that age. And these things tend to taper out. But it's important to keep in mind that there's a view that all this stuff goes away by high school. And it's not the case either. I find sometimes the more serious cases, including youth who self-harm or there's suicidal ideation, suicide, very serious implications for stigma, as you mentioned earlier, like the stigma that happens from that. And those cases sometimes are with older teens as well. So I think that schools need to be proactive about this and continue the messages throughout high school. Of course, there are challenges with student schedules being different, and it's hard to have like that one talk in a gymnasium in high school, but there should be greater efforts to keep consistent messaging about this throughout high school.
That's an interesting point about it doesn't stop with high school, because a lot of people feel that like once you're to school, everything is okay. And then you look at the radicalization of these hate groups and these these things that are going on, and it is, oh my goodness, it's terrible. So
Absolutely.
really,
Yeah.
yeah, you start looking at where things are going. Unreal.
I
Can
think
you?
that, part of that, sorry to interrupt you, but
No,
part of that is just that critical literacy media, how
yeah,
to understand algorithms, how algorithms function, and
yeah,
understand that we can have control over these things if we're aware of them. Maybe not complete control, but these platforms are important. They're important to access health information. They're important for political awareness and activism among young people. So these are important platforms. They should be on, but
yeah,
be aware of privacy implications of how all of our data is being collected by large corporations, that we sign off with terms and conditions that we click on.
that's right. That's right. So, like you say, not all is bad. I mean,
Mhm.
you're very right about a lot of this needed for education and health reasons, whatever. Can you recommend something that parents could do in an effort to keep their children safe?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my advice is maybe a bit predictable in this sense of getting to know and communicate with your child actively. There's some research on this that looks at surveillance of young people. When they get phones, how often the parents are actively monitoring what they're doing and where they're going. And there are some pretty invasive, I would argue, surveillance software that are marketed to parents, marketed to mothers in particular, quite frankly,
Mm,
that are sold as, well, I need to keep my child safe and sort of a tough love sort of thing. But recently, scholars looking into this have redefined monitoring in terms of more proactive methods as well. Verbal check-ins, trying to have dinner without screens once in a while. Maybe not every day, realistically, but once in a while you have dinner, you ask what people are doing, connect. I think it's if it becomes a regular habit, you get less eye rolls, you get fewer eye rolls about that, and have regular discussions, not only about generally the internet, but what specifically young people are observing. I'll give you a quick example. I've got an elementary school child who used to watch some of these Peppa Pig videos, right, on YouTube Kids or
yeah,
something. Now, YouTube Kids is marketed as
yeah,
fairly innocuous, I guess. It's fairly safe, but there were some. This requires some explanation here, but there was some manosphere kind of discourse coming through there. There were words like Chad and Stacy and all these sort of, red pill, blue pill stuff coming in
oh,
some of these parody videos that he would watch on Peppa Pig. Now these were pretty funny videos in my view, and I'm
yeah,
pretty harmless to watch, but these messages can very quickly trickle through to children and young people without parents being aware of it and what the
that's right.
meanings are. So I think as much as possible, checking in with your children and having ongoing dialogue about this is important. And keeping in mind, parents model behavior and
Yes,
parents themselves, I find, in terms of I've asked young people and parents alike about internet addiction and their view about these things. Often you find that parents admitting to be somewhat quote unquote addicted themselves to these sort of things. So, children observe what they see.
yeah, they do. They do model. That is exactly it. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Michael. This was excellent. Actually, I'm really looking forward to your presentation. I have a lot of people that I would like to inform of your presentation and ask them to join us. If anyone wants more information about our conference, please go to www.albertacrimeprevention.com. And so, in closing, I just say thank you again. Be safe,
Thanks so
and
much, Gene. Thanks
you
for
bet.
having me.
We'll chat with you later. Thanks a lot, Michael. Thank you.